Allison. Thank you so much for being here to help our founders with their decks, and you can take the floor whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Thanks, Maya. Thanks, everybody, for joining. We have a packed hour, but I also want you guys to use it. Like, benefit of showing up to something is you get to ask your questions and interrupt me. So at any time during this, if you have a question, you can type it in the chat. Our community lead, Lily, is here and she'll monitor that. Or you can raise your little emoji hand and then you pop up to the top of the screen and you can ask away. But nice to be here with you all. I'm Allison, and as Maya said, I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Scroobious that I started 2 years ago. And my own origin story for that was, prior to Scroobious, I launched and ran a medical device startup where I did our fundraising and raised about 10 million over the course of 5 years. But for me, what was defining about that whole experience was fundraising as a woman and just the incredible bias and challenges I faced that I was not prepared for, despite having been the only woman in the room and as a tech operator for a very long time. So I started Scroobious to provide the education and resources and guidance that founders need to create investor compelling material and to help understand how you approach fundraising so that you can actually be taken seriously and be given meaningful consideration when you go to pitch at the early stage. And then we're also building an innovative way to help relevant sources of capital connect and discover you for potential investment. I'm also an angel investor myself. I got started in angel investing this year on my own and as part of a group. And I am a mom to 2 elementary age kids, and I'm very vocal about the power of parent entrepreneurs. So at Scroobious, I'm not going to spend much time on this slide, but we have basically productized the value that you get from spending thousands of dollars on a pitch coach by giving you this education and resources online asynchronously through mini lessons and templates you can download, and we pair it with feedback on your own stuff from a human who understands you. And we put a little discount code in here for you guys on any level of membership if anybody wants and is helpful. But I'm also happy to just connect personally with anybody following the workshop as well. So to get into it, pitching overall is really about storytelling and de-risking. The reason it can be so frustrating and painful is because that is not intuitive. It's not intuitive to put yourself in the mind of an investor. It is intuitive to sell to your customers or to market to people who might buy what you're selling. But when you're pitching the opportunity to invest in your company, it's an entirely different angle. And investors are looking for different pieces of information from that. So we have a framework that we developed with hundreds of interviews with investors and tons of secondary research and experience. But there is no one size fits all. There is no standard way that everybody should pitch. And you need to do what's right for you. This framework does work really well for early stage pitching, and it has a nice narrative flow. So this is what we're going to walk through during the workshop today. And we're going to do kind of like a Cliff Notes version, or our best tips for the things that you should have in each of these sections. Okay. Amanda, I'm very glad that you have your camera on, because it is always a little unnerving to look at a bunch of black boxes. I hope this is resonating.
It is. Yes, thank you.
Awesome. So when you're thinking about your pitch, there's always the question of how many slides should I have, or trying to cut down on the number of slides. But I encourage you to think about the time that you have and what your goal for that meeting is, versus just the straight number of slides. So today we're going to talk about your introduction deck, that first deck that maybe you send ahead or you present if you've got, like 20 minutes or something with somebody, where you're going to spend about 5 minutes going through the content of your deck. that will tell you what type of content and how many things you want to have in there, how much time it takes you, because you always want to leave about 2/3 of the time for just discussion and question and answer. You don't want to build your deck so you take up all of the time that that meeting has allotted for. And that's how I would think about it. Adjust it based on your time and the goals for the meeting versus number of slides. And then the other really big thing that we talk about a lot is how you handle feedback. So every investor you pitch to, because there is no standard one way everybody should pitch, is going to give you their opinion. And investors are very opinionated. And if you ask an investor for feedback and another one gives you feedback, more likely than not, that feedback, they're going to conflict with each other. So I really encourage you to not go and change your deck or incorporate feedback in a knee-jerk kind of style. If it's really hard if you're sitting there pitching to an investor and they're like, well, you should do this and you should have had this and you should do it this way. You want to go fix all those things, but that's just that person. That's that investor's view. If you go and immediately change everything after you hear feedback from one person, you're going to pitch the next person and they're going to give you feedback. And you're going to say, but I had that in my last deck. I wish you'd seen that. I just changed it this morning. And you're going to drive yourself crazy. So as hard as it is, don't go make changes after one person gives you feedback. Collect a bunch of it. Listen and see if people are asking you the same thing over and over again. That will tell you maybe I need to add some content there, or see if a lot of people are giving you the same types of feedback. Then go make changes. Don't do it right away. And then it's also your pitch. You're going to pitch a lot of people. Most of them won't write you checks. So you have to put in that pitch what is authentic to you, what you believe, and what you're comfortable presenting, right? You need the right content in there to make it compelling for investors, but it's your pitch. It's not anybody else's. You're offering an opportunity to invest in your company that's going to make that investor money. So just always keep in mind too that you drive this. This is your thing, not their thing. Okay. Before we get into the 10 sections, I'd like to give some of our top tips for how you organize your slides and information in a way that makes it easy for people to understand and take it in. So not necessarily graphic design, but principles of how humans easily absorb information. Because that's the goal for your slides, is to make it quick and easy for someone to understand the point of them. Again, questions at any time, interrupt me. I hate hearing my own voice for an hour straight. So this is a really big one. It's really important in today's hybrid world. Like we were just talking when I joined the call, I'm still getting used to like driving to a meeting and then coming home and having virtual meetings. We're going to be doing both for a long time. And humans absorb information differently when you're in person or when you're looking at a screen. So one of the biggest ones is eye contact. When you are physically with someone, you are compelled to meet that person's gaze. It's just a reaction that we have. That means I'm going to look at you when I'm in a room primarily, and then I'm going to look at the slides that you're presenting. It's important to know that because humans cannot both hear words and read words at the same time and understand them both, right? Think about the last time you were reading something and somebody was trying to talk to you and you were like, can you just wait? Well, and then you just give up, right? Because you can't do both things. So when you're in the room with someone, their first instinct is going to be listening to you talk and then reading the slides. When you're remote, you still feel my eye contact when I stare right in my camera. It's been proven, and you should train yourselves to look right in your camera when you're talking. But you don't feel compelled to meet my gaze because you know I can't see yours. So what that means is you are first going to pay attention to what's on my slides and then hear what I'm saying. So however long it takes you to read the slide is how long I'm not really hearing your words, unless you're saying the same thing as what's on your slide. So it's just important to know that Just biologically, that's how we take information in when you're presenting.
I have a question for you, Allison. Thanks for
Yeah.
saying pipe up during your presentation. So that's really good feedback, because I've also been told pitching Kilo over the last like couple of years is like, don't read what's on the slide. But in a virtual world, it seems like that actually is the most cohesive way to share the information. Because if you're can only read and not listen, if you put the two together, then it's more memorable. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, so we're going to go over some more tips that kind of speak to that, but in general, and we'll get to something called header statements, which really helps keep you kind of staying, saying what's on your slide. You want to have on your slide just enough text to convey the point, but it should, like, someone should be able to read it in seconds, right? It should be like 20 to 30 seconds. And I've read the words that are on your slide, right? Even think about, like, look at the slide I have right up here. It takes you very little time to read that. And then you can hear what I'm saying, but it still makes the point. So you don't want to stray from what's on your slide, but you don't need to read it word for word the same. It's just if you start making a different point, or if you give me information that is not on the slide, that's when you have that disconnect and people start missing information because you're talking about something that is different than what's on there. Hopefully that helps. All right. And so along with that, I share a lot of examples in this deck today. They're all real. These are all from real founder presentations. You want to use simple language, right? Cut down on the words. So, and make it clear. In this example, the before statement, a comprehensive platform for customer engagement that will revolutionize social media for a unique group. What does that mean? Right? Like it doesn't mean anything to me, and it's a lot of words to read. What it turned out to be is the best way for writers to share their social media posts. And we'd never have gotten that from the first one, right? So you don't need to use a bunch of big words. You don't need to throw in revolutionize or, all these kind of big things. When you're doing an investor presentation, it's about quickly conveying information. It's educational. So just say it. Say it directly, what you're trying to say, and in the fewest words that you can. So it's easy. And then make it sparse too, right? This is the principle we talked about already. However long it takes you to read that chunk of text, I'm not hearing your presentation. So break it up. Bullets are really good. Our eyes like bullets. You can use fragments of sentences in presentations. That's okay. Make it, it's just simple, sparse, simple, easy. This one seems like it should be very intuitive, but we see it all of the time. If you are going to have a color in your background, don't have a lighter shade of that same color for your text. Choose something that is a high contrast. People are looking at their screens. Oftentimes they're on their laptops. That is really hard to read for a lot of people. So do yourself a favor and just make your font and your background contrast with each other so it's easy to read. Okay, this is another one of those bigger things. I cannot emphasize enough the power of header statements. Like if you remember anything from this entire presentation, I want it to be that you should use header statements. Don't just label your slides with problem, solution, go to market. Don't just do that. Think about this slide. And if someone remembered one thing, what do you want it to be? What's the point? So what about this slide should somebody know? Write it in the header. It's okay if it's a couple lines. Tell me the point of the slide. Do the work for the investor. They're not going to give you the time that you deserve to do it on their own. And then everything else on that slide should support that header statement. If you have something on your slide that is not related to that header statement, different slide. One major point per slide. And so Amanda, this will help when you're thinking about how do I say what's on my slide, because it's 1 point per slide. And this is where you also don't get so hung up in number of slides, even if it makes some more, because you run through them a little bit quicker when it's 1 point per slide. And it's more about the time than the number of slides. So, here, obviously, this is an example from one of our own decks. but an investor will do basically this exercise of copying and pasting your headers. They're not going to copy and paste, but they will read only your headers. They'll go through the whole deck and read the headers and then decide if they want to go back and look at the rest of your material. They actually do this. So you want them to flow. You want your headers to tell your story and logically lead someone through a narrative, because that's what your deck is. You're telling someone the story of your opportunity. Love header statements. Please use them. This is just an example from one deck to show you what it can do. On the before slide, it was just our solution, the label, and then the content of the slide. New slide, same content, it didn't change. But now it says our solution is an offline acquisition platform where consumers pay for services with their engagement. Would not have gotten any of that without that header statement. And he says it during his presentation. But if you don't get to hear his presentation, you don't know that that's what he's trying to tell you with this slide. So you control the deck when you put in those header statements. Okay, we're going to get into the actual slides in the sections. So first, we're starting with your title slide, which I know seems like, why are we starting with that? That's not really content, but it is. There are some things you should put on your title slide. Use it. Your slide is real estate. Make it worthwhile. Put stuff on there that's meaningful. The other thing about a title slide is now when you email it, it shows up as a little image at the bottom of someone's email. Make them want to open your deck. Put stuff on there. So if you have screenshots or images or photos of your product or solution, put them on there. Put the name of the company with the logo. Put a short description of what your company does under that logo. Put all of your contact information. How can somebody reach you? Do you have any socials that you want to put up there? I'm even looking at mine now and I'm like, oh, I don't have our company Twitter handle on there. I got to do that. Like, I got to fix my own slide. Put a copyright down at the bottom, just have it on there. And if you've won any awards or you have anyone, backing you or some like accolades that you want, put the logos down at the bottom. Just get those signals right up there. Associate yourself with logos that you're already working with, right? Make someone want to open it. So here again, just some examples to talk more about that tagline, because I know that can be tricky for people to come up with that short description. And even a tagline, I don't like that because you don't want to make it marketing language. So if we look at these examples down at the bottom, these are original slides, and then on top is what they turned into. And if we look at True Wine, for example, it started with Duolingo for wine. And there's a lot of founders that do the I'm the X of Y kind of comparison. The problem is, what if I don't know what Duolingo is? Then this means absolutely nothing to me, right? And then what about Duolingo? Is it the gamification? Is it the customer experience? Is it something about the technology, the back end? It's ambiguous when you make a comparison of yourself to something else. Instead, just say your own thing, right? Fun, accessible wine education for the next generation of wine lovers. So much more clear. I have a good sense of what we're going to learn about when we hear your pitch. So write something that is just clear and simple what you actually do, not stuff you would put in marketing copy. So I've got these are just summaries at the end of these sections, things to remember when you're making your title slide. Just, we've gone over most of this. I don't think we have to recap the title slide. Moving into mission. Why are you doing this? And again, this follows our framework for the core 10 sections and what usually works well for a narrative flow. This origin story is not in every framework. I can tell you, we have heard from investors over and over and over again during the events that we run and in the process of making this framework. They want to know why you started a company. They want to know your origin story. And a lot of founders feel like we should take ourselves out of the pitch and make it just business and, just straight to that stuff and not make it personal. investors want the personal at the early stage because they are investing in you. You don't have this giant company behind you. You don't have all these sales figures to lean back on, these numbers. You are the student. That's why this is so important. You're de-risking yourself as the founder, that you're going to stick with this. Everything about your pitch is de-risking. And we can talk about that more in each section, but that's what the investor is doing. That's their mindset, is taking away risk that this opportunity will work, that I'm going to give you money because I believe it's going to work. So your origin story, why did you start your company? Think back to your decision. Was it a personal connection to the problem? Did you experience the problem and you couldn't find a good way to solve it, so you're doing it yourself? Do you have particular technical expertise that lets you see something that other people wouldn't see? What is it? What made you start a company? Put it in there. It's a big deal. And put some photos in there, like make it personal. This is a great way to kick off your presentation because it immediately puts you at a human to human level, and you're eliciting a type of emotional response from the investors, which makes them want to learn more, and it makes them remember what you're saying more. And if you have particular qualifications that make you the right person to be doing this, or you have, this amazing background or degrees, this lets you get it up there right away. So right off the bat, you should listen to me. I clearly know what I'm doing. And if you just jump into your presentation without this element of yourself, you're missing that opportunity, and they're not going to be as engaged as they could be. So put it in there. And then some founders like to include a vision statement in their deck. You may or may not want to include a slide that's like this, but if you do, don't fall in the trap of writing some lengthy thing that is full of big words that you think an investor wants to see. Just get to the core. What is it that your company is providing to people? Just a clear statement that people will resonate with. It honestly does not make you seem smarter to use a bunch of big words or to throw buzzwords out there. Investors see thousands of pitches a week sometimes. They've heard it all. They've seen it all. They want real stuff. They don't want buzzwords. And then when you talk about what it is that you do, this is my best advice for getting down to the core and making it simple. I know it sounds silly, it's legitimate, and I do this. Go tell someone who has no idea what you're doing. Like, call up your grandparents, go to, talk to your kids or someone else's kids, tell them what you do, and then ask them to repeat it back to you. Because that person is taking your words and they're synthesizing it in their head. They're simplifying it on their own. And then when you ask them to say it back, it's very informative, right? If they tell you something back that is not correct, you got some more work to do. If they tell it back to you or they can't tell it back to you, they're not sure, you got some more work to do. If they did get it, they're going to give you that simplified language just on their own. That's how they're going to say it back to you. And you can use those words. It is an amazingly informative exercise to do. Go tell someone what you do and ask them to say it back to you. Okay, so your mission section, it's your origin story, really. Why are you doing this? Why did you start your company? You can go into it a little more in depth in the title slide, but you're not telling the whole thing right now. And then are you saying it in a way that anyone could understand? Lily, you just raised your hand. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question that I know the answer to, but I think it's important to touch on. What if I have a startup that's super high tech, or a medical startup that is very niche and specialized? And it's hard to break down.
Yeah, so good question. I don't care what you do or how technical it is, you can always break it down to simple language. I spent all morning in a pitch practice breakfast with founders building therapeutic companies. So they're, that's like as scientific as it can get. You can always describe, if someone says, tell me what you do, you don't have 10 minutes to tell them everything that you do and how it all works. But you can say it in a minute. You can tell somebody what you do. Just continually break it down. Okay, we're in the first of like the meatier sections. So once you finish your origin story or your mission, it's a really natural way to lead into your problem, because most companies are started by someone who experienced a problem and then wanted to solve it. So you kind of naturally lead from there. When you talk about your problem, you want to make it specific and you want to quantify it whenever you can. And again, throughout this workshop, we've only got an hour. Oh my God, we only have half an hour left. I'm kind of giving you like the hits, like the top. This is not all inclusive of everything you need in your deck. But when you talk about quantification, I included these two examples because they're not like financial projections, right? It doesn't have to always be money. The quantification should help convince someone that there is a problem and that people are feeling a pain point, or there is a scale to this problem, and having data behind what you talk about makes it objective. It takes out that subjectivity that like you're just saying there's a problem and I should take your word for it. It's proven because you can go find that resource that's backing it up. So in one of these examples, this founder was building a toddler food product that she was claiming was healthy, the others aren't, and she didn't have the nutritional values in there at first. So I'm really just taking your word for it, right? And for a lot of investors, they have kids. Like I look at it and go, well, I fed my kids those things and I thought they were healthy. So, I guess I can go look it up after your presentation, but you put in the nutritional values and immediately you can't argue with that, right? You look at that and it's one of those like, oh crap moments, those are not healthy. How are they marketing it that way? But you can't have that reaction without seeing the numbers. And then you can use graphics to help illustrate that quantification too. Again, you're trying to make it glanceable, really fast, get this information in, right? So again, something from one of our decks where we show the funding gap in terms of the breakdown of dollars and cents with the image of who gets what underneath it. This is a very impactful slide for us, and it's backed up by data. So when we get questioned on, is this true? Yes, go look at the credible source. So use data wherever you can. And then, like we've talked about before, make it easy. Do the work for the investor. Pull out what they are supposed to know. So if we look at this slide breakdown in the before, there, it was labeled problem. There's something about disrupting this big industry on the side up there with it. There is a giant graphic that draws my eye as the focus point of the slide, but it is just a generic graphic. It's not telling me anything. And then there's a couple statements with no data behind them and a quote. So if I'm the investor looking at this, I don't really know the point of this. Like what is the point? What am I supposed to take away from this? And I don't know that I'm convinced that there's a real problem just with the way the slide is. So when you do the work for the investor, you come up with a header statement, right? There's still a label. You can still say problem if you want, but have that header statement. Life is online and older adults are left behind. Pick out one key statistic. 75% of users 65 plus do not feel confident on their devices. Clear stat, that's impactful. And it leads to the conclusion of modern tech is designed without the input of older adult needs. I find that slide very convincing and very quick to understand what the point of it is, right? And you might look at it and say, hey, that seems like a lot of text. I thought we weren't supposed to have a lot of text. What does it take you, 10 seconds if you read it? And if I'm saying the things that are on there, it really is easy to understand. Cool? Okay, I'm gonna guess it's cool. So when you're thinking about your problem section, the one thing, we don't have slides in here in this kind of workshop, but the other thing to consider is you want to define your problem down to a place where you could solve that problem, because your solution section is next. So don't leave your problem at a very broad place, right? If I left my problem at there is a funding gap, well, I can't solve the funding gap with my one company. No one company could. So what problem are you actually solving? And it's okay for your problem section to have 2 to 3 slides to get there. You can start broad, but define it down to the thing that you are actually solving. What is that? So now you're going to tell me how you solve the problem, right? That problem section is standalone. This problem exists. Now, how am I solving it? So one of my big tips is I'm so sorry. Kids are home from school and not respecting my office boundaries. One of the big pieces of advice is don't use complicated things or acronyms. So acronyms in particular, you are an expert in your space. The investors are likely not. Every acronym means something different in different contexts, right? CRO. Before Scroobious, I ran a medical device company, and everyone knows a CRO is a contract research organization. That's what we all mean when we say CRO. That's probably not what you think. You might think of conversion rate optimization or chief revenue officer, whatever it is. There's many different things. Even MD, right? Everyone thinks it's a doctor, right? But you're talking to an investor and they're probably going to think of managing director because that's their world. So even the simple ones, it always means something else. Put the whole word, all the words and the acronym in parentheses if you want to use it in the rest of your deck. Same with complicated charts. Don't put some complicated chart up there. Don't use words like deduplication and localization. Don't do it. What am I supposed to know from this chart? Tell me. Pull out the insight and tell me. Put the chart in an appendix so you have it. Don't put it in your core deck. And then for your solution section, please show me the solution. I can't tell you how many decks we see that don't actually show the thing, the solution. Put it in there. It's okay if it's mock-ups. It's okay if it's just, prototypes. Show me what the thing is that you are building. And a really good way to help an investor easily understand your solution is to walk through a use case with those screenshots or images, if it's physical, however you can show me how a customer uses your thing. So pick one way a customer interacts with your solution. It doesn't have to be all encompassing, just pick one example and walk me step by step. How do they use your solution to solve their problem? That is the best, most tactical way to explain what it is that you're doing. Because if you get to the end of your solution section and someone doesn't understand your solution, none of it really matters. The rest of this deck is about business mechanics and execution. So if they don't get why you're doing this, that there is a real problem for a large group of people or customer segments, and that you are actually solving that problem, none of the rest of the deck matters. So it is worth the time to get these sections right. So as you're thinking about your solution section, are you talking about something that directly solves the problem? If it doesn't, you can redefine that problem section, right? Make it end in a place where you solve it. And is it clear how a customer would use it to solve their problem? Is it clear how they interact with it? And then avoid the acronyms and jargon. Any questions about origin, problem, solution before we move on? No questions? Are we thumbs up? Are we all like along for the ride? Okay. So now that I understand your solution, help me understand how you're going to make money with it. What is your business model? Because we're talking about an investment opportunity. So I do need to know all of these things. How are you going to monetize? And it's okay if you don't know yet. It's okay if you're pre all of this stuff, but say it and be honest about it and talk about what you plan to do. It's okay if you have different models. You can have B2B and B2C, or you can have whatever model you're using, but put it clearly on there, right? So I have an example of a deck that is consumer and enterprise. Just make it clear who are your paying customers and what and how are they paying you. And make sure you're talking about your paying customer who may be different than your end user. This is about who's paying you money, right? And I've got our own example up there. We are in go-to-market phase. We're launched, one of our products, and we're monetizing that. And we have plans for future monetization, and there are lots of opportunities. And I'm just honest about it, right? We don't have it now, but this is what we're planning, and these are our opportunities. And that's okay. No one expects you to have everything figured out right now. And then we're often asked about financials. Should you include your projections? So it depends on the deck and the pitch context, right? In this first deck, your introductory deck and pitch, the majority do not include financials, and I recommend not having them in there. Your goal is to get more time, get another meeting. You don't need projections when you're very early on in your journey to convince someone that you're worth another meeting. If you do include them, investors tend to hang on them and scrutinize them. And particularly if you're from an underrepresented segment, they pick at it more. And you might have some sensitive information in your projections, and you cannot expect someone to sign a non-disclosure agreement before your first pitch. So if you have stuff in there that you don't really want out in the public sphere, just don't put it in there, right? Save it for another conversation. Okay, so as you're thinking about your business model, is it clear that you know who your paying customer segments are? What are they paying you? Even if it's just a preliminary ballpark estimate that's based on some kind of justification, you have to say why you picked these things, but put it in there so there's a sense. And then what is the model? Are you charging them a flat fee? Is it subscription? Is it a razor blade, a freemium? What is that model that's driving your revenue? Cool? Okay. Thank you for the nods. I appreciate them. So it's really a good flow to then go into your market size, because it should incorporate that business model that you just told me about. So bottom up market size, that's the way to go. Bottom up is specific to you and your business and your model. And that's why it is much more compelling to investors, because it's really specific to what you do and your actual opportunity. Top down can give some good context about your industry, but there's a lot in that top down that has nothing to do with what you're selling and your opportunity. So when you think about this, these are the terms that a lot of people have heard: TAM, SAM, and SOM. So your TAM, this is your total addressable market. This is saying if everyone who bought what I'm selling at the price I'm selling it did buy it, this is how many dollars that equals. So that's the total, that's the world of opportunity. This should be forward looking, not just what you're doing today, but for your company. What is your vision for the company? And it's taking your potential customers, how much they are paying you, and you multiply those, and that is your world of opportunity. This is an important element because there's some math behind it, right? There has to be a big enough market that it could support the desired return on investment. So for venture, they really need something to be at least $1 billion or over, because it has to support your competitors as well and still have the opportunity for that return that they're looking for. Angels might not care as much, friends and family won't care as much, they don't need 10x return, but the venture fund does need the ability for that to exist. And then your SAM is basically giving that a little haircut. It's saying there are some customers in that TAM that just realistically aren't going to buy what I'm selling, or I wouldn't really be able to reach. So you're just discounting it a little bit. And then your SOM is your obtainable market. And really, this is your short term. Think about it in terms of the next like 1 to 2 years or 12 to 18 months, because that's about how long a fundraise is expected to last. So who are you going after now? And you could do another discount on the SAM. You could just take a percentage, or you can calculate what is it that is actually in your near-term market. Maybe you have a regional approach, or you're only going after certain segments, and you can put the numbers specific to that go-to-market approach there. So a framework that we really like, I'm going to just talk through this quickly, but I think this is a really nice one for founders. It makes it approachable. We actually have a whole Excel workbook in our platform for this. But in essence, you're going to, in your first column, this is a fictional B2B SaaS example, but it works for any business model. Your first column, you're going to have all your customer segments. How do you segment your customers? So this is fictional B2B, so they segment by large, medium, and small companies. It can be 10 segments or more. It can be just a couple. This is specific to your business. You just want to make sure that they are mutually exclusive, so you're not double counting people. Then your next column, you're going to do some secondary research, and you're going to estimate how many of these customers exist. How many are there? Typically, you would do US if you're a US-based company, and an accepted rule of thumb if you want global numbers is to multiply that by 3. You don't have to go searching every single country unless you have a country-specific approach. So you're going to say, okay, there's about this many of each of these segments of my customers. Then you're going to say, what is my expected annual revenue from one of those customers? And do it in each segment. Right? So you can have different expected revenues for different segments. So you can have a B2B segment and you can have a B2C segment. You can have different pricing, again, as long as they're exclusive of each other. And then you multiply, and that gives you your TAM. And what's really nice about this table is it gives you your TAM for every segment of customers and in total. So the total is what you put on the slide. But it's a really helpful exercise, even for you as the business owner, because you can go play around with it a little bit. You can adjust your pricing and say, what does that do to my TAM? You can see if you have one segment that's like dominating all your revenue, and maybe that's a risk or something that you don't want, and you can rethink, right? So it really lays it out nicely. And then for serviceable, you can say, all right, I think realistically for large companies, 10% of them just aren't going to leave their current provider. They're just not going to buy what I'm selling. So I'm going to discount it and say, here's my SAM. And you can have different haircuts for different segments. And then for obtainable, you can do that same thing again. Or again, you can say, okay, I'm going to start the next 1 to 2 years is going to be focused on the Northeast. And here's how many companies there are in the Northeast and what I would charge them. And you can have another little calculation. They don't have to be in this percentage discount like they are. Does this model make sense? This framework for doing a bottom-up market size?
Yeah, I like this a lot. I haven't seen this before.
Nice. Michelle, thank you for the thumbs up. Appreciate it. Yeah, there's different ways to go about doing a lot of these sections of a pitch. We have a recommended framework for each one of them that we think are, helpful in thinking through it. And I really like this approach, and it makes it doable, right? This doesn't seem overwhelming. So some good sources to find this data, and I know you'll get the recording after, so you can come back to this. But I want to talk about just a couple of them that I think are underused. You can always go get government data. The point is you just want to find a credible source, right? These aren't your projections. It doesn't have to be precise. You're trying to find the best information you can to size the market. Look at industry incumbents. Great source of data that most people don't use. So if there's like a big legacy company, or if there are some, companies that have gained traction in your space, they usually will put investor presentations on the website. If they're public, you'll find them there for sure. And in their investor presentations, they have market data that they paid for, and it's good. And that's a credible source. Download their investor presentations. It's full of good information. I've done this so much, and they're really underutilized. Same thing with trade associations. They often will pay for research. Go take it. You don't only have to use government sites. Okay, so when you think about your business model section, do you have customer segments that are mutually exclusive, so you're not inflating your numbers unwittingly? Do the segments have the same expected annual revenue, or are there different amounts? And do you have credible sources? And then for your SOM, is it realistic? Because this is the use of funds, right? This is the period for this fundraise. Does this seem like a reasonable market that you're going after? If you have a $4 billion SOM, no, you don't. You haven't defined it enough. Okay, competition, how you fit into the competitive landscape. And remember, you're going to be writing your header statements that draws me through this narrative as we're going along. Again, different frameworks to do a competitive landscape. You might see the 2x2 a lot, where you have your axes and then you are always up and to the right, depending on how you define your axes. I like the table better. We found this has really good reception, but some investors do like the 2x2. So, try and find out, maybe you want to build them both and have one in the appendix. The issue with the 2x2 is there's more subjectivity, right? It depends, like, how did you label your axes? And then the investor has to decide, do I get it? And do I agree with how they labeled their axes? And you tend to have more companies on that graph. So you've got a bunch of logos around. And a lot of times founders will pick pretty big logos to put on there. That just makes it seem like, well, how could you be up and to the right of these big companies? So there's just a lot more factors at play there. But again, some investors do like that. So, just know your investor, know who you're pitching to. With the table, much like a bottom-up market size, it's more specific to what you're actually doing. And it's from the customer perspective. So think about yourself, you're in the first column. And then if you were a customer evaluating whether to buy your solution to solve their problem, what else are you considering? What's in that customer's competitive set? What are they evaluating to solve their problem? It could be other companies. It could be just ways they're solving it. And this is a behavior change. It doesn't necessarily have to be another company. How are they solving their problem? And then in the rows, these are the things that they are evaluating to decide, what do I choose? What do I choose to do? Right? So from the customer perspective, what are the value adds or the benefits that they are looking for a solution to provide? And it's okay if it's more words, right? You just want to make it clear, simple language. And then you fill in the chart. You should have all checks because you're showing what the customer's looking for. These are the things that they want. The rest of the chart should not be all X's. There are other things that do certain elements of this. But visually, what you're saying when I look at the chart and I see chunks of X's is you've identified the white space where the customer is looking for something that doesn't exist, right? Or it only exists in pieces in other solutions and you have it all together. So again, I really like this framework. It has good reception by investors because it shows that you've really thought through what the customer is looking for. So competitor section, and again, just these are top tips, not completely inclusive of everything, but think about what should be in that competitive set, and does it include status quo behavior that isn't necessarily another company? And then what are the value adds or the benefits that your customers are looking for? What would make them pick a solution over another? All right. Your why now. This is, again, something that's not in every framework, but investors really do want to understand two key things, both from a macro perspective. Why is right now the time for your company to exist? And then a micro perspective, what traction do you have? Why is right now the time for you to be fundraising? Why are you pitching me right now? So from a macro perspective, if you do talk about COVID and the pandemic, just make sure that you talk about how you're accelerated by it, but you aren't defined by it. Because as you can see, right, things are changing all of the time, and you don't want to tie yourself to being needed because of the pandemic, because then you're shortening the lifespan of your company. So I pulled out an example here, one of our founders who developed a way to do remote eye exams, clearly hugely accelerated by the pandemic and when it all started in particular, but she makes it clear that she's not defined by it, that this is a need that's going to exist after. You can pull in quotes. This can be really impactful to get quotes from other people who are not internal to your company, who carry some weight in your field, to talk about why now is the right time for your company. So some external validation, right? Those are positive signals. And then when you talk about traction, it's really effective to do a timeline and put some chronology around your company. So you start at when you were founded. You can have the time periods be quarters, they can be months, they can be years, whatever makes sense for you. And then you're going to list some major milestones that you've hit, right? What are the key things that have happened in the life of your company? And put in the funding along that timeline with your milestones. And that really helps give that temporal perspective of where are you as a company? Have you raised before? Why are you raising now? It should coincide with some milestones, and you can make it forward looking a little bit, not too far, to show what are the milestones achieved by this round of funding. Cool. All right, I can only see Amanda and you look like slightly concerned. So I hope everything is okay.
I have my deck open that my co-founder and I have been working on, and I'm just adding comments for us to go over.
Awesome. So when you think about this section, are there macro factors? Is there something happening in the economy and the social climate? Is there some technology that makes now the time for your company to exist? Is it accelerated by those factors, but not defined by it? And have you talked about your traction and your proof of concept and all the things that make now a good time for a fundraise? Next section, go to market. Oh my gosh, we're almost at 4. I'm going to speed through. Okay. This is, again, framework that we recommend you think about. Investors are looking for your customer acquisition strategy when they talk about go to market. Do you know where your customers are, how you're going to reach them, and how you're going to convert them into sales? So think about it like now, your early stage. How do you find your early adopters and your champions? And how do you do it quickly and cheaply? Because that's the stage of your company. What are you doing there? Then next, your next phase. How are you going to expand beyond your early adopters, beyond your champions? You have a little more money to work with. How are you going to reach them? What is that strategy? Don't just say social media. Don't just say content marketing. Why? Why those things? Why are your customers there? Why will it be effective for them? If you're B2B, do you need to hire sales staff? Are you going to have key account planners? They all have implications for how you're going to use the capital that you're asking for. And then later, how do you grow exponentially? Again, what are the assumptions behind the plans for reaching and converting all of these customers? Okay, I'm going to keep going through. We're almost at the end. Team, founder market fit is something that is so important, but really your team slide is showing execution, right? If you start with your origin story, this is a nice way to bookend your presentation. Start with you, founder. Why are you doing this? What's that origin story? And then at the end, here's the team. Here's the people that I have recruited to do this with me to help me execute all the stuff that I just told you. You're taking away the risk that you can do all this stuff, right? I brought up my own slide here because we're a small team and that is okay, but show how each person is complementing the other and utilize your advisors and investors if they really are hands-on helping you. I've blurred out my investors here, but they are hands-on helping me. And put in the ways that they are helping. What are their function areas so that you show I have a well-rounded group around me that is serving as my management or my team that's going to do things in lieu of being able to hire everyone right now without the funds to do so. All right, so when you talk about your team, it's really de-risking the execution of it and showing that you have fit with your market, that you understand your customer mindset. All right, I'm gonna keep going. I know we've only got like a minute left, but I'm just gonna plow through. And again, I'm happy to stay a little longer because of that technical snafu. Optional content. So these are things that you might include depending on the context of the pitch, but I don't include them in the core 10 sections. You should have them in the appendix so that if you want to bring them in, you can. Or if that situation calls for it, you can move those slides into the core and have them there. So financial projections, if you do want to include them, the key things to make sure you have are they believable and are they reasonable? Don't make a hockey stick just to make a hockey stick. Because if you do get into due diligence, that's a goal, right? To get to check, you have to get through due diligence. They're going to look at your projections. You're going to send them the workbook. So if your assumptions don't make sense, or if you've manufactured some big numbers, they're going to see it. And then you're just really shooting yourself in the foot. So make sure they're believable. Make sure you can talk about the assumptions that underlie that growth. What needs to happen to achieve that growth? What are the key levers in there? And then your ask slide. I don't have this in the core because general solicitation regulations are real. If you send your ask to someone who is not an accredited investor, that you've put it out like on Twitter or some other platform where you don't know if it's accredited investors seeing it, then you are soliciting the general public for investment. And the SEC cares and they don't like that. And it can cause problems for you later, even if it's not now. So only have the ask if you know it's going to someone who is able to make investments from a regulatory perspective. When you do have it, just put all the information up there. How much money are you looking to raise? What are the terms? What is the vehicle? Is it a safe? Is it a note? Is it a priced round? How are you going to use the money? And also, what milestones do you achieve with that money? Okay, last one, should you talk about exit strategy? We get asked this a lot. The answer really is it depends, but more likely than not, no. You're just too early and you don't have to worry about it. Unless you're in, biotech or something where the goal is to get acquired, that's the vehicle that you're working toward, and you would make strategic decisions based on that acquisition strategy. Otherwise, I really wouldn't worry too much about it at the early stage. And then your thank you slide, use it, put your contact information on it, just like your title slide. This is real estate. Don't just say thank you. Put information on there, include links and spell them out in case somebody is viewing it in a non-clickable format. Put everything up there. Okay, I ran through super quick at the end. I know people had to jump because we went over time, but any questions, I'm happy to stick around and answer anything. No, my one person with their video on had to go. Anyone? Elizabeth, Michelle, Brett, I'm just gonna name names. Elizabeth, give me the double thumbs up, fantastic. Anything that anybody else wants to cover or ask?
Hey, can you hear me? This is Brett. I'm just curious, how long would you suggest that the deck, should be? Because sometimes they could be 10 slides and sometimes they can be 3 times that long. And I'm sure investors have a short attention span.
They do have a short attention span. And so this is where at the beginning we talked about, I would think less about number of slides and more about the time that somebody has. So, in general, for this 5-minute pitch, it's usually between 10 and 15 slides. You want to spend more time at the top. So your problem section should have 2 to 3. Your solution should have 2 to 3. And then you can usually do everything else in about 1 slide. But really, it's more how long does it take you to present that content?
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I don't know, Lily, was there anything going on in the chat that we want to address?
So Elizabeth just put in a quick question. Some people say to put team at the end, and you said put team at the beginning. Are there cases for each?
Yeah, you can do it either way. I actually recommend having your origin story at the beginning. So why founder about you and your team at the end as a bookend, using your team about execution, less about why you started it. If you are building a company where credentials are very important, then you might want to put the team at the beginning to show that you have the credentials needed. But otherwise, I like that way to have your origin at the top and your team at the end. Okay, well, I know that we had that little snafu in the middle, and I apologize that we went over time, but I'm happy to make myself available if people want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, or, you know, I'm very active on Twitter and socials. You always can, Lily as well. And I'm happy to just give some friendly answers to questions you might have about the workshop too.
That was amazing. Thank you, Allison and Lily, for being here today. And yeah, everyone definitely take them up on that.
All right. Well, thank you for having us come present. And I hope this was helpful as everyone's building their decks. And yeah, thank you very much.